Welcome to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. We are the go-to resource for leaders looking to greatly improve their communication skills. Whether it's one-on-one interactions, team settings, public speaking, or your digital communication. By improving these skills, leaders can create stronger connections and drive positive change within their organization. Each and every episode, we sit down with leaders from various fields, just like you're grabbing a cup of coffee with them. We dive into real, practical conversations. Our goal is to help you transform your communication skills so you can lead more effectively, build stronger relationships, and make a lasting impact. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's learn together. Well, how can asking the right questions make you a more effective leader? Maybe even 10 times more effective. Well, welcome to the Speak with People podcast. I'm so excited that you are joining us today. We are diving into an incredible conversation, an incredible interview today with a leader that I greatly admire. I found him on LinkedIn, reached out, and then I was let into a masterclass on communication. On my birthday, he sent me a birthday gift of one of his books that he wrote. And then I asked him to be on the podcast. He needed a few months. I came back around, got his book in the mail. Everything that I have received from Bob has just been exceptional communication. And so I am so thrilled for you, our audience today. And today we're going to dive into that. What if we can become a better listener? What if we can ask better questions, more powerful questions? And I cannot wait to dive into this conversation. Today we're sitting down with someone who knows exactly how to make them a reality. Bob Tiede is a leadership expert. He's the co-author of Leading with Questions. This, I believe, should be a textbook for every leader, young and old, because it has been mind-blowing for myself. Bob, I'll let you tell more of your story, but welcome to the Speak with People podcast.
Jason, I'm so honored to be your guest today.
I absolutely love it.
Well, you asked for my story. Jason, when you have an introduction like you just made, many listeners could think, "Oh, I bet asking questions just comes naturally to Bob." And my response is, "Oh, I wish it did." I'm actually a charter member of TA, and people say TA. I'm not sure I know what TA is. I said, well, maybe you've heard of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, TA is Tellers Anonymous. We go to our meetings instead of, my name is Bob, I'm a teller. Now, of course, Jason, that's
Yes.
fictitious, but whenever I share that, people in the audience come up later and say, Bob, I'm also a charter member of TA. And I'll start with a confession. And my confession is that for most of my career, I was a benevolent dictator. My only paradigm of leadership was I thought the job of a leader was to figure out what needs to be done and then to tell your staff what you needed them to do. Now, Jason, I did say benevolent dictator. I grew up in a home where I was taught to say please and thank you. So if you'd been on my team, Jason, I don't think I ever would have said, hey, Jason, go do this. It'd been more like, hey, Jason, here's what we're working on. It'd really be great if you could please do this.
Yes.
And when you did it, I would have said, Jason, thank you at a staff meeting. Jason, stand up. You all need to hear what Jason did. And I don't want to suggest we got nothing done, but I am confessing my only paradigm of a leadership was I thought the job of a leader was to figure out what needed to be done and then to tell the staff what they needed to do. Now, for me, that changed in 2006 when I found the first edition of the book, Leading with Questions by Dr. Michael McQuart. Now, Jason, probably like you, I love books. I eat books for breakfast. And, there's always a morsel almost in every leadership book I've ever read. But I had no idea when I picked this book up that it would change my leadership forever. As I read it, it was filled with stories of leaders from literally around the globe who were leading with questions and the questions they were using. And as I read it, I had only one question. Why hasn't anyone ever shared this paradigm of leadership with me before? I immediately embraced it. I was already on our U.S. leadership development team, and I began to teach out of the book. and it was so well received, but it changed my leadership forever. So,
Wow.
Jason, there's just a bit of the background of how did Bob, who is a charter member of Tellers Anonymous, become a leader in leading with questions.
Wow. Wow. I absolutely love it. It's timely too, how this interview is happening. It's timely how you sent me your book because in a couple of days in Minneapolis, I'm working with a group of financial advisors about the right questions to ask. And so
Hmm.
as I've gone
Yeah.
through this book, it was just amazing to be able to dive in. And so what led you to finding, Dr. Michael's version 1.0? Was it just a happenstance? Did somebody just hand it to you?
Well, my wife, Sherry, loves to go to bookstores. And whenever we go to a bookstore, she goes all over the bookstore. She knows when she's done, I'll still be in the leadership section. And my habit is to take a look at all the leadership books, spot a couple that I've never seen before, and pull them out, grab a chair, sit down, begin to peruse them to see if any of them are going home with me. Well, in 2006, we were at a Borders bookstore in Orlando, Florida. Borders no longer in business, but it was at that time.
Yep.
And that's where I found the first edition. Perused only a few pages and said, wow, this one's going home. And it was a page turner for me. And as I said, I began to teach out of it. But that's how I found it. It just happened to be on the shelf. And pulled it out that day. And again, in purchasing it, had no idea what the future would become.
Wow. I love when you're able to find a resource or a book that just so greatly resonates you. I would probably imagine you've given out that book to a few people.
Oh my goodness! Well, that and another part of the story, Jason, is as I shared already, I began to teach out of it. In 2012, one of my colleagues had started a blog, and she was also on our leadership development team. And I ran into her at our headquarters and said, "You've started a blog." And she said, "Well, Bob, you need to start a blog." And I said, "Why would I want to do that?" And she said, "Well, Bob, I know you're at that time 60 something, and you probably know I'm 50 something. And our target audience, the emerging leaders that we were wanting to develop, their average age was probably 28, 29. They'd been on our staff a few years. And she said, a mistake that a 60-some-year-old leader can make is thinking they speak English, I speak English, we're good."
Mm,
She said, "Well, that is helpful. That is helpful. But Bob, they also speak another language. It's called social media.
mm.
And when they, politely inquire, 'Hey, Bob, are you on LinkedIn? Are you on Facebook? Are you on Twitter?' And that 60 some leader said, 'No, no, no, I'm never going to do that.'" She said, "Well, our staff are polite. They're probably not going to say anything, but I fear they're walking away thinking, I hear old Bob did some good things in his day." And Jason, that just resonated. And so I said, okay, well, the next question is, what would I blog on? And I thought, I don't want to do just another leadership blog. Mind you, there'd be nothing wrong with that, but there's so many good ones. And then this question came to my mind. Was there a niche of leadership that I could blog on? And as soon as I had that question, it was, oh, it'd be this leading with question thing. And so, there's a website called WordPress that helps bloggers, put it all together. Well, I went there, and the first question they ask is, well, what do you want your blog to be called? So they could do a search to see if that website name is available. And I smiled as I typed in leading with questions. I mean, I thought surely the author or the
Right.
publisher will have tied it up. But it was available at the cheapest price, $29 a year, whatever the baseline price was. So I grabbed it, I got it legally, and begin to blog. I waited actually a couple months. I had no idea how. I didn't know Dr. Michael McCourt. I had no idea what he would think.
Yep.
But after a couple of months, I sent him an email. sharing how his book had changed my leadership, thanking him for it, telling him about my blog, asking if I could excerpt from his book, make the cover the featured image, a link to Amazon for purchase, and send it off, still wondering how will he respond. Within 24 hours, I had the most gracious email. Bob, you've made my day. Bob, you have carte blanche permission to excerpt from the book. Thank you for, promoting it, having the link to Amazon, etc. And over time, we became friends. But
Wow.
there you go.
I love that. That's amazing. So, as we talk about leadership, uh, uh, a leader who leads with questions, you've talked about can be 10 times more effective than a leader who leads with telling.
Yeah, yeah.
I know you talked about that in your story a little bit, but kind of dive into that a little bit
I
more
will.
for
Well,
us. And what does it look like in practice?
Jason, I'm going to ask you a couple questions to illustrate this. And the first question is kind of a silly question, but just know I'm going somewhere, so go with me. Imagine that you have your whole team in a big rowboat. There's oars for everyone. We'll just say that you have 9 others on your team plus you. Everybody's got an oar. And as the leader of that rowboat, you want to get that rowboat across the lake as quick as possible. How many of them do you want to have row with you?
Everybody.
Everybody. I told you it was a silly question. Now, that next picture I want you to imagine is that same team is now gathered around your conference table. And there's an opportunity on the table. You've just shared. Here's the opportunity. Now, listen carefully, Jason. If you're a leader like I used to be, the benevolent dictator, and you think it's your job to figure out how to take advantage of this opportunity, and then you're going to tell them what to do, how many mental oars are in the water trying to figure out what to do? Only
Wow.
one.
Right.
Only you.
Right.
But now imagine for a moment you're a leader who leads with questions. So you share this opportunity, and then looking around that table, you say, hey, gang, what do you all think we might do to take advantage of this opportunity? Now, Jason, how many mental oars might be in the water?
Much more.
Yeah, I'm hoping all 10, you and
Yes,
the
right.
9 others.
That's right.
And as you begin to hear ideas, what is the probability that one of your staff might have an idea better than you had?
It's very high.
It's not a guarantee, but in hearing
Yep.
9 other ideas, the
Yep.
probability is there.
Yep.
So let's just imagine one of your staff seated across the table from you is Sarah, and she says, Jason, here's an idea. And you think, wow, that is so much better than anything I was thinking. So you say, Sarah, love your idea. In fact, Sarah, would you lead our team in executing on that? Jason, how hard will Sarah work?
Oh, a lot harder now.
Whose idea is she executing?
That's right.
Yeah. And another kind of scenario is the team may build on Sarah's idea. Somebody say, wow, and we could add this and do this. And suddenly now when you're done, the whole team has their fingerprints
Wow.
on the idea.
Exactly.
Well, Jason, that's some of the background why a leader who leads with questions can be up to 10 times more effective. They're hearing more ideas. Plus, the second thing's, I think, actually even more important, and their staff now have ownership.
Mm,
It's their idea versus, well, Jason's the boss. We better do what he wants, even though I don't think that idea is a good one.
yep.
It doesn't have their heart in the same way.
Oh, my goodness. I love that. It was about 15 years ago. I was working on an MBA and we had a leadership class and they handed us Primal Leadership by Daniel Goleman. And I had not read anything by Daniel Goleman up until that point. And every chapter was just this deep revelation because I thought, wait a minute, I've only learned maybe not even, benevolent dictatorship, but, just dictatorship in the leadership
Yeah.
that I had saw. And I mean, these kind of concepts are just absolutely amazing. And so you think any leader can make this change. Any leader can go
Oh,
to leading with
yes.
questions.
Jason, whenever I speak, I ask the audience, who here would like to learn to lead with questions in 30 seconds?
Mm.
Well, every hand goes up. And and I say the reason I've asked this question is I often sense from my audiences that they'd like to learn to lead with questions, but they imagine they'll have to get a master's degree in questionology. Like a nice idea, but probably will never get there. And so when they hear 30 seconds, it's like sign me up. And so I pull somebody up from the audience. Jason, you're my audience today. And as I pull that person up, I always say, I picked Jason because I think he has a photographic memory. He's only going to have to hear my four favorite questions one time. He'll have them memorized. And Jason, we're going to test this. I have a second hand on my watch.
Okay.
And audience, I do think Jason has a photographic memory, so he's only going to have to hear these questions one time. He'll have them memorized. Now, Jason, the clock's going to start when I say my first favorite question. I'm going to share all four. When I'm done, I'm going to say, do you have them memorized? You'll say yes. I'll say, share them with us. And upon you sharing the fourth question, the clock ends. So let's see if we can do this in 30 seconds. You
Okay.
ready?
Yep.
Jason, my first favorite question is, what do you think? Second, what else? Third, what else? Fourth, what else? Do you have them memorized?
I think I do.
Share them with us.
Well, the first question was, what do you think? And the second question was, what else? And the third question was, what else? And the fourth question was, what else?
Wow, 21 seconds.
Hey, we did it.
We did it. Now, Jason, some in the audience are likely to be a little skeptical. Like, Bob, you can't ask somebody, what do you think? What else? What else? What else? And I say, well, not in that rapid fashion. Of course
Sure.
not. This is a conversation. And you're going to add a topic to the what do you think? Hey, what do you think we ought to do about? How do you think, what do you think we could do to take advantage of this opportunity or to solve this problem? There's going to be some issue. And when you ask, Jason, they will answer. And something, though, I've discovered, research shows, is that when we're asked a question that requires an opinion, we instinctively, this isn't like well calculated, but instinctively, we roll out a safe answer to test the waters
Mm.
to see how did they respond to that. And so, Jason, if I asked you, what do you think about something, and you give me that first answer, and I said, well, Jason, that's stupid. Everyone knows that. You're sorry you answered.
Yep.
Next time I ask, I'll get nothing. But when I say, wow, Jason, that's good. What else?
Mm.
Well, you relax. Wow, Bob's appreciating what I'm sharing, and you'll give me more.
Yep.
And instead of moving on, even then, when I get the second response, I'm likely to say, hey, Jason, let me grab a pen. I've got to take notes. This is pure gold. Please continue. What else? And you'll give me more. And, other versions of the what else is, hey, can you say more about that? Or another version is to ask, they've shared something and to ask another question about one of the things they shared. But
Mm.
what I've discovered is you actually get to their gold nugget, their very best thought, with the third or fourth question. We probably all heard the proverbial story of the old gold miner who was mining for gold all his life, looking for the gold vein, never found it, finally quits. And later somebody came along and found the old miner was within 6 inches of the gold vein when he quit. Well, if you only ask somebody, hey, what do you think about? And you get that first answer and you say, okay, thank you, and you move on, you got close, but you didn't get to their best thought, their gold nugget. It's the what else? Say more about that. And Jason, remember the promise here was who would like to learn to lead with questions in 30 seconds?
Mm.
One of the things I love about leading with questions is so many of the best questions are so simple. They're not long, complicated, like, how would I ever remember to ask that?
Yep.
And for a leader who is, like I was, the teller, just with these four questions in their next meeting with a staff member one on one or with their staff around the table, whatever the topic is, instead of saying, gang, here's what I want you to do, say, hey, what do you all think we might do here?
Wow.
And as you hear answers, wow, that's good. What else? And what else? You will have moved from being the benevolent dictator to the leader who leads with questions with just these 4 questions. Now, there's some more you can add, but it's that simple.
Wow. Boy, I love that. So along with these questions, it seems like uh, the tandem skill of listening is just,
Oh,
unbelievably
yes,
imperative. And so I've
yes.
read from you, we can become a better listener in just 8 seconds. Like, for some of us, that would be like incredible. So how do we make the leap?
Oh, well, Jason, when you hear 8 seconds, I always ask, what sport has an 8 second clock? And not everyone knows, but maybe you know, Jason.
I, what sport has an 8 second clock? It's not coming to mind.
Okay, well, you're not a Texan. Bull riding,
Okay, I would not
bull
know.
riding, rodeo. For a bull rider to have a qualified ride, he has to stay on that bull for 8 seconds.
Wow.
Now, we think of 8 seconds as being next to nothing. If you've ever watched bull riding, again, you don't have to be a fan of the sport, but just flipping channels, you came
Yep.
across it, you watched a little while, you quickly realize like 80% of the bull riders, we're talking professional bull riders, Jason, not you or I getting on a bull. We're too smart to do that. But a professional bull rider, and 80% of them are knocked off, bucked off in less than 8 seconds. So 8 seconds to a bull rider is an eternity. Now you're thinking, okay, Bob, that's bull riding. What's that have to do with listening? Here's something really fascinating. Research shows that the average person, when they ask a question, only waits 2 or 3 seconds for an answer. You see, that silence is like an eternity. And they're so bothered by that silence that if they ask a question, the other person doesn't respond in 2 or 3 seconds, they will fill that silence with either answering the question themselves, asking another question, or just moving on in the conversation with no self awareness of what they've just done. So, how do you become a better listener in 8 seconds? Ask your question and then keep comfortable eyesight, not intense, but comfortable,
Mm.
and count to yourself 1001, 1002, 1003. Jason, there's times I've counted to 1030. The longer the silence, the better the answer. Now, of course,
Wow.
it depends on the question. Jason, if I was in your office, hey, Jason, which way to the men's room? You're going to answer that instantly.
Right.
But if I said, Jason, I've got a question for you, what would you say has been one of your greatest failures that actually has led to one of your greatest successes?
Oh, jeez.
If you've never been asked that question before, how helpful will it be if I begin to talk again in 2 or 3 seconds? Not very helpful. But if I will just remain silent and wait, I could well be the beneficiary of an incredible story, an incredible piece of wisdom. But I've got to give you time. Now, Jason, maybe you and maybe some of your listeners today are actually later going to hate me for the 8 second rule. Because you see, up to now, they've been part of that group that's been in oblivion. They've asked the question, they didn't answer 2 or 3 seconds, they filled the silence with words. But later today, you or they are going to ask somebody a question, and at 2 or 3 seconds, you're going to speak again, and then boom, you're going to remember the 8 second rule. You're
Yep.
going to think, darn that Tiede. I used to be in oblivion, and now, wow. Jason, it still happens to me. Here's what I do when I violate the 8 second rule and become aware of it. I'll say, wait a minute, Jason, time out. My bad. I asked you a question and I didn't even give you time to answer, and I started
Wow.
speaking again.
Yep.
Forgive me. Here's the question again. This time you take all the time you need. And I've
So
never had
powerful.
anyone be unforgiving. and I'm confessing again, it still happens to me.
Absolutely.
Instinctively, we want to
Oh,
fill that silence with words.
boy, I love that. It's yeah, I haven't talked about it on the podcast yet, but My first book will be coming out this year. And actually, in the introduction, I talk about how one of my fatal flaws in communication with my family is I don't call it the 8 seconds, but instead of letting them respond, I jump in, pretend I'm them, and then I carry on both conversations in front of them. It's great for my marriage. But you're so correct. Oh, that simple pause, giving it time. I mean, it's just amazing. And especially in our, we've got things buzzing and going off all the
Yes,
time.
yes.
If we lock in with someone, it just shows them so much respect and really deepens that trust. Wow, that is powerful. I feel like we're getting a master class here, Bob. This is incredible.
Well, just absolutely honored to be your guest today, Jason.
I love it. I wanted to ask you. I'd come across former CEO of Popeyes, and she'd always encourage her leaders to ask about 3 to 4 events that shaped their lives. And wow, that's one of those questions. Why is something like that so impactful? How can we use that kind of
Yeah,
gold as a
yeah.
question?
Cheryl Batchelder, one of my friends, was 6, 7 years the CEO of Popeye's Chicken. When she was invited to be CEO, Popeyes was in trouble. Shares were trading at $10 a share.
Oof.
Under her leadership, 6, 7 years later, shares were at $60 a share, and Popeyes was then sold to a Canadian firm. Well, she wrote a book called Dare to Serve, and for me, it's been the best book on servant leadership I've ever read because she shares how she used the principles of servant leadership to turn Popeyes around. And in that book, she asks that question: how well do you know your staff? Do you know the 3 or 4 events that have most shaped who they are today? Now, Jason, anytime I read or hear a great question, I can hardly wait to find somebody to ask. And and for me, I just got done reading that question, and like within 15 minutes, I'm on a coaching call with one of my colleagues in Canada. His name is Neil. I've known Neil for since 2007. We're good friends. I'm privileged to be his coach, and I thought when I asked, well, I said, Neil, I've just read this great question. I'd love to ask it of you. And I thought I probably won't learn anything new because I thought I knew his whole story. And turned out I was wrong because I said, hey, here's a question. What would you say are the 3 to 4 events that most shaped who you are today? And Neil said, well, Bob, have I ever shared with you that my birth father died when I was 9 months old? I said, no, Neil, you've never shared that. He said, well, Bob, I have no memory of the man. I was only 9 months old.
Wow.
He said, my mother remarried, and the man who's my stepfather is the man who in my heart is my dad because he's the only dad I've ever known. But he said the story's been shared with me so many times that in the final weeks of my birth father's life, he knew he was dying. He was in a big bed at home. And he said, I'm told that every day he asked to hold me. And as he would hold me, he would pray over me and ask that God, the Heavenly Father, would be a father to his little boy, his son, that he knew he was not going to live to raise. Well, Neil began to have tears. His
Wow.
tears caused me to have tears.
Yep.
And Neil said, Bob, I believe that his prayers are the first event that marked my life. He said, I believe God honored those prayers. And as a result, I came to faith in Christ. And Jason, I don't know. My question, Neil's answer, 3, 4 minutes. And relationship that was already good suddenly went deeper. And this has become one of my favorite questions. I must share that first time asked this question of Neil was the most emotional response I've ever
Mm.
received. But every time it's fascinating. And I'll think back to Cheryl Batchelder, uh, and part of this was instruction to her store managers. Well, when you think of a fast food place, who are the workers? Well, many times they're high school kids. It's an entry level job.
Yep.
And she was not suggesting for a manager to line up all the staff and ask them all at one time, but over time, to find time to ask your staff, hey, what would you think are the 3 to 4 events that most shaped your life? and then to listen. And we've often heard it said that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers, they leave
Right.
bosses, they leave who they report to. And I can only imagine a lot of fast food places, some of the staff wonder, I'm not even sure the manager knows my name because he says, hey, bud.
Right.
But here, where a manager's taken that time to ask and find out, it's like, wow, I'm in a good place. I'm working with somebody who actually knows some of my story. And Jason, another thought on this question that I love is I've found over time, there's times I've asked, "Hey, tell me about your family." Well, if the family's great, it's a great question. If they're in the midst of a divorce,
Yep.
it's an awkward question. I say, "Hey, tell me about your business, your work." Well, again, if they're gainfully employed and things are going well, it's a great question. But if they just got laid off, it's an awkward question. When I say, "Hey, tell me the 3 to 4 events that most shaped your life," they can go wherever they want with the question.
Oof.
They don't, I'm not asking them to share a painful thing, but what's surprising is how many times they will actually share something that's, my parents' divorce marked my life,
Yeah.
or in my college days, I was on drugs, and they
Yep.
share things that I would never asked about, but they felt comfortable.
Yep.
And so that's that question. It's become one of my favorite.
Oof. Just powerful. Talk to us about the question, can you tell me more? Can you tell me more?
Oh,
Especially
yes.
nowadays, I think about the work landscape, we have 4 generations working together. And so, like you said in the beginning, we just don't all automatically know how to communicate with each generation. Seems like that question could really help with some of those
Well,
barriers.
it does. It's as I share, it's my second most favorite question. Now, Jason, I use this question whenever, almost always when I'm asked a question. In other words, somebody asks a question, and I'll say, hey, can you tell me more about that? Now, the reason is so often it's another confession. I hear a question, I think, oh yeah, I understand that question, Jason. Here's the answer. Now, most people are very polite. They don't actually say, well, Bob, that wasn't actually my question. They say, oh, thank you. And then they ask another question. You realize they just reworded the first question because you missed it. I must say, my wife's not that polite. She'll say, there you go again, Robert. You haven't even heard my question. You're already telling me what to do. Ouch. So when I get a question, rather than just assuming I understand, I say, oh, Jason, can you please say more about that? And
Mm,
they always do. And that allows me to actually understand the question and also buys me time on how I might respond. Now, Jason, whenever I speak, I share a funny little story about the value of this. Here's the story. Little Johnny is 7 years old. He comes running in the house yelling at his mom, 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 where did I come from? Johnny's mom has not been expecting this question, not at age 7, but collecting her thoughts just a bit, she invites Johnny in the living room where she shares all about the birds and the bees. Little Johnny's eyes are wide as saucers as he takes in every word. And when she's done, she says, so, Johnny, do you now understand where you came from? And he again shouts, no, Joey said he came from California and asked me where I came from. Now, at that moment, Jason, do you think Johnny's mom had wished when he came running the house yelling, Mom, 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 where did I come from? She would have said, Johnny, can you tell me more? He would have said, Joey said he came from California and asked me where I came from. And she could have said, Boy, you're born right here in Texas. You go tell that Joey you're from Texas. Johnny runs back out of the house with the answer he was looking for. And Johnny's mom can save the birds and the bees story for when perhaps that might be the question in a few years. Well, it's a funny little story, but Jason, how many times have you and I answered what we thought was the question only to have missed it by miles?
Wow.
Well, when you're asked a question, can you please tell me more about that? Will be the solution. And to make sure you understand. And again, I've never had anyone say, nope, won't tell you another word. They always do.
Wow. Wow. Boy, I love that. I love that. Well, hey, as our time is coming to an end, let's finish with some rapid fire questions. We're building this online database for leaders to be able to go and get inspired. And so we ask all of our guests some questions. I know these are tough questions, but is there a speaker you highly recommend? Every time you hear them, you can't wait to tell somebody about what you learned. You pass on their talk. Is there somebody that's just really been on your radar and you highly recommend them?
My friend Bob Bodine.
Mm,
Bob is an executive recruiter. He his specialty is really sports. He's done a lot of placements for NCAA head basketball coaches, football coaches, athletic directors, um, and he's author of two books: "The Power of Who," and the second book is "Two Chairs." Um, and just an incredible communicator.
mm. If you are a podcast listener, is there a podcast that's either a development or a guilty pleasure that you just, every time you listen, you can't wait to share it, can't wait for the next episode?
Wow, wow. There are so many. Jason, I actually can't name one individual though. They're just there's so many good ones.
I love it. Well, this question is probably going to be a little bit harder. Is there a book that you would recommend? Boy, every leader, you've got to really, if you're going to only read one, read this book. I love it.
The third edition of Leading with Questions, available on Amazon or wherever books are sold. But highly recommend that. But then, for those who would like something that's free, these two books are both available as free ebooks on my blog.
Oh,
Great
wow.
Leaders Ask Questions. And now that's a great question. If you go to leadingwithquestions.com, up on the top, you'll see the word books. Click on that, and you'll have to enter your email, but you'll have access to actually, I have five free ebooks, but
Oh,
these are two of them. These two are also available as free audiobooks recorded by me and download them at MP3, just like a podcast.
yep.
Listen at your convenience as you walk, run, drive, whatever. Uh, but those would be books I recommend.
I love that. I've got to ask you, when my birthday came around and you sent that incredible gift in the mail, how many of those do you send a month?
Oh, probably in the neighborhood of 60 or 70. Two, three a day.
My goodness, you talk about impactful. I mean, that was something else. That was incredible. Okay, you gave us your website. Is there any way else you want people to connect with you, find out more about you online?
Well, I invite everyone to subscribe to my blog. Subscribing is free. And when you subscribe, you'll be joining leaders in over 200 countries who are
Wow.
committed to increasing their leadership effectiveness. Just go to leadingwithquestions.com. Again, leadingwithquestions.com. Cursor towards the bottom, you'll see a place to enter your email address and enter write in your email address and click on subscribe, and you'll instantly be joining those leaders. Every Monday and Thursday morning into your inbox will come a new blog post related to leading with questions. And I'd be honored to have anyone listening be my newest subscriber.
Absolutely love that. Bob, again, thank you. This book has been a game changer for me. Your other resources have been as well. And this has been one of my, out of the 190 or some favorite podcast episodes. Powerful, insightful. Thank you for your stories and just being so vulnerable, opening up. Really appreciate your time today.
Well, Jason, you are a great host. I've been honored to be your guest today, and honored that you're now one of my friends.
Thank you for listening to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. Thank you for leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And thank you for every like and every comment. Every single time you cut and copy a link and send it to a coworker or a friend, it absolutely means the world, and it helps each other transform our communication skills. Lastly, don't forget about a great resource that's available to you, our communication skills library. At the end of every episode, we ask each guest their favorite speaker, their favorite podcast, their favorite book, and we've compiled all of those resources together to give you an amazing library to continue your growth and development. Thank you again for being a listener and for being a part of the Speak with People community.